during the whole time explaining that, I was also in the background thinking, okay, that's the one side. I wonder if there's something to be done for the students, as like, there's so many, tutors out there, like the Kumons and your
Hmm.
after school things that are really helping a lot of kids. But again, they're expensive, so they're kind of
Hmm.
prohibitive to people in the lower rung of the financially. And
Sure.
so I wonder if, because even if you look at the idea of let's see if this analogy doesn't fall apart between school and therapy, for example. Someone goes to therapy, they're talking about where they might have issues, social issues, etc., and they have these discussions. Maybe there's advice from the therapist, but then the person needs to go out into the world, and maybe there's
Right.
something that wasn't discussed, or in the moment they really need a bit of a hand with something, and you don't have that there. And
Hmm.
so then when you go back, you kind of can only start that next therapy session based on if you've made any improvements and have any new problems out in the world. Otherwise, you kind of just start where you left off,
Hmm.
right? Where that's now they're talking about how psychedelics can help, facilitate talk therapy to be more helpful. All this to
Hmm.
say, I wonder if there's like, this is probably 3-4 years away, or 2 weeks, depending on the timeline of technology now, but
Right.
where there's a, not done on a laptop, because like we've established, that's pretty distracting, but like a little, unit at home that's one screen, like an iPad, but it's only used as the school tutor that maybe the school just gives to the student. And then when they're at home, they can ask, how do I do this? I'm having this problem with math, or I don't really understand the Magna Carta, or like things like that, where
Hmm.
the chatbot can help them without just giving them the answer. It can help encourage them. Whereas I think most parents would be lost for a lot of these things, because they also don't know what the hell the kids are studying. If it's above like a seventh or eighth grade level, there's some things I'm sure even parents would struggle with. Are you
Sure.
seeing anything on the tutor side of things, or what do you think about a concept like that?
I love that, and I think I will if I have a chance to write it up on the Substack, I will give you credit. I think that's a great suggestion.
All right.
Um,
Cheers.
I hadn't thought outside the classroom, so I mean I hadn't included outside the classroom, but I think that's a great idea, and I think I want to say two things about that, and the second thing I'll say is about privacy. But first one is just in terms of the idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think especially if that, let's call it a device, thinking of like the Echo Dot. If that device was in school with them as well, and so that device was there, connected to the teacher, connected to the class, so that that device had access to what the learning goals were for the course, what the learning goals were for the lesson, what the outcomes were for the lesson, what the assessment target was in terms of what students would be able to do, so that it was
Uh,
not just plugged into general knowledge, but it was plugged into contextual knowledge for success in the class.
right. So you
So
so you could upload or train it on the textbooks for that semester, for example, and the teacher would say, okay, we've done chapter 3.5 today, and these are the questions that I've given to it. So it can go home and realize that that's what it's worked on.
right, right. Because sometimes you'll look up information and it gives you the answer to a different question than the one you asked, and you can't figure out kind of how to ask your question in the right way to get the answer you're looking for.
I know people
Um,
like that.
so, I'm a chemistry teacher. My daughters have both gone through chemistry. Well, my youngest is in it now, and they're good. They do most of their work on their own, but they will ask me questions sometimes. And where I think I offer the most value is not so much that I know chemistry. A lot of people do, but I know what the teacher's asking when they ask certain questions.
Okay.
I know why the teacher is teaching this concept now and where they're going next. And so that's different than the answer that my daughters would get if they just Googled something, because it's embedded in their particular goals for learning that material at that time. And so
Hmm.
the device that you're talking about could do that as well, especially if it were plugged in.
Right.
One of the tools the suggested tools for building that I talk about in the book is something that is like that so let's say to sit on the desk in the classroom, that would analyze, say, partner conversation. So one technique teachers will use is have a think, pair, share. Students think about the answer to a question, maybe they write something down, and then they reflect to a partner, right? So if you have students process information both in their mind and then out loud, they have a better chance of understanding it and learning it. So that's a common technique in schools.
Okay.
However, the teacher can only listen in on certain conversations, say one or two conversations at a time. If there are 24, 30 kids in the classroom, there's no way they can attend to everyone. But if there's this listening device that is able to pick up that conversation and analyze it after the class, the teacher could get a readout on uh, which what students were understanding, what they weren't understanding. It could process and synthesize that data. It could be in every desk at once, analyzing that information. And so, what you just talked about with that tutor is a great extension of that, in that it could both help the classroom because it could take, hey, these are the questions that your students are asking me at home, and it could also help at home in that, hey, this is what we were doing in school, and I'm building on it now. So I think that's a great idea.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and I didn't even come full circle on that on the analogy, and because the reason why I was comparing it to that is that when the kids, if the kids go home and do homework, but they can't get past a certain part, they haven't really moved forward from the lesson the day before.
right.
I mean, I remember I was sick in my final year of high school, and I had calculus that one time, and I was able to do
Mm-hmm.
everything else from home, thankfully. But I missed like a month of calculus, and
Mm.
when I got back, I didn't know what was going on,
No.
and I kind of just bailed out. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not doing this
Yep.
class, and I would just like go for walks during that class.
Yeah.
I don't even think I went to the final exam, and so in that idea, I was thinking like, so if kids can go home and if they get it, you know, they get it. Some kids don't need to do that homework, but the
Mm-hmm.
ones that don't maybe need to ask a chat station or like a an AI station at home, like, oh, I really don't understand this, because
Mm-hmm.
I think it must be frustrating for kids. For some reason, I would ask any question that came into my head, no filter involved, and I think it was really to my benefit even to today. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of kids have a lot of trepidation for asking a question in a classroom, because if it sounds stupid, they're going to be laughed at, they're going to be made fun of.
Oh,
There's a lot of
absolutely.
social
Yeah.
disincentive for them to speak up when they're confused. So if they can do that, and who knows, some parents might also give it a social or disincentive, right, at
Mm-hmm.
home. So if they had a chat box where they could ask absolutely anything, and they would treat them like my chat GPT AI treats me, then there's an incentive to be like more and more open, because and then I think kids can grow like that. So I know I would love to see something like that. Let me know if you want a co-founder.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that, and I think that could work. You mentioned when students are absent. I mean, we can patch kids in with Zoom. After COVID, we know how to do that. But
Hmm.
students who are learning from home often don't. Maybe they'll get like 2/3 or 3/4 of the learning. They
Yeah.
just don't seem to pick it up as much. But that the chat box that you're talking about, I think, is a great idea.